Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to BK 141. It is week 2 now. So, sorry, week 3. Oh, it's week 3. We just finished up week 2, our chocolates. I can't believe we're already halfway through the class. It's wild. All right. So, we are going to be going over some truffles tonight. Super excited. We've got a lot to go over today. A lot of things to do today. A lot of fun, as usual. And you know how I feel about chocolate. So, love it. But first, I would love to recap with you guys about week 2. So like, this is your domain right now. Talk to me. What went well? What didn't work? You guys have the floor. Let's do some Q&A because we will be tempering again this week. So I really want to get a feel from everybody how week 2 went. So who wants to kick it off by starting about their experience? I know somebody's got questions. I know everybody didn't have a perfect go their first time tempering. Go ahead, Linda.
Can you hear me?
I can.
It was interesting because that was my first time ever doing that. But I did some reading up on it before I did the assignment. And after I had some leftover chocolate, I said, well, what I'm going to do with it? I made some candy. So I made some chocolate cashew clusters, and they turned out fine.
I read that. That sounds divine. I
And
love cashews.
and they firmed up just right. You know how just in the right texture and the right thickness. It was just I used the ice cream scoop, but it's
Now,
still
did you toast your nuts before you toss them in your chocolate?
no, I didn't think of that because the recipe I was looking at it just said chop up and add in. That's what I did.
Definitely. So toasting your nuts allows them to maintain that nice crunchy texture. It also
Oh,
brings out more of that nuttiness. So it has more of like that nut punch of the flavor in there. So like no matter what you do, even in just kind of baking cookies or banana bread, toast your nuts first. It really helps. It changes the texture. It changes the flavor. I think that if it's not a practice that you are using at this point, definitely start. Always toast nuts before really anything you make. It'll
next
change
time
your
I do that.
world.
But it was good otherwise though.
Oh yeah, I bet.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to hear. So we've got some candies going on. Did anybody make the mendiants that I sent out? Those little like chocolate coins, and you can put some like dry fruit, some nuts on there. Did anybody take the time to make any of those with their tempered chocolate?
I didn't make those, but I just had like a little problem. My house was like a little too warm, so I had to throw it in the freezer for a little bit. But after I threw it in there, they came out just right.
So yeah, you can definitely, if you're working in a like a warmer environment, you can use, I would use the fridge. The freezer is a little bit too cold, so you want to use the fridge, and you want to use it sparingly as well. So some of the refrigeration that you'll find in a chocolate shop is not as cold as like our home refrigerators are. They're a touch warmer than that. But you just want to make sure that in your home refrigerator, as you're going in and out, it does help that chocolate kind of shrink as it's cooling to chill it. And it will really help, like I said, in some warmer environments. But remember, there's a lot of moisture in our refrigerator. Our home fridges don't have fans in there keeping everything dry. So you have to take into consideration that humidity. That humidity is also going to keep that chocolate soft. So when you're in a chocolate shop, you're going to be working in a temperature and humidity controlled environment, which helps a lot. There's so many factors, as you guys are learning, there's so many factors that go into tempering chocolate. Go ahead, Jessie.
I was having the opposite problem. My kitchen was freezing because it is so cold here. So I had to keep putting it back on the bain-marie to keep it warm. Is there a limit as to how many times you can do that before, you shouldn't really keep warming it back up?
As long as it's not like it hasn't spiked over your working temperature, then you're fine to go on and off of it as often as you need to, as long as it's staying in that that warm or that working temperature. Because once it goes over that or under it, if it goes under, you'll start to see a lot of gray streaking in your chocolate because it's cooled down too much. So if it goes out of that zone, then you would have to start the tempering process all over again. But as long as you're keeping it in that sweet spot, then you're good to go. Something that can kind of help a little bit is having a towel, like a tea towel or something on the counter. That way you can kind of rest the bowl on that, and that will help to kind of insulate it and help it to stay at its working temperature a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. I'm hearing some good things. I'm definitely seeing good things as well as I've been taking a look at the assignments so far. You know, I see a lot of people having fun, doing all kind of different decor. How does anybody want to talk about like the piping? How did the piping go? Or even making the cornets? Was that fun, or was that a little bit maybe challenging that first time around?
I had fun doing the piping part. That was awesome.
Good. It
My
can be a
name
lot
and
of fun.
everything. My kids wanted me to write their name, so I did all that. It was pretty cool.
Now, did you find that you had some pretty good control over the fluidity of the chocolate? Because it's way more fluid than a buttercream, and I know a lot of us are used to working with buttercream. How did you feel about that? Like, was it pouring out too fast as you were writing it, or you felt it had a pretty good flow?
A nice control over the first time I cut a little too much off, so it can't made another one, and I got it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Does anybody else want to talk about week 2 before we dive into week 3? Andrea said the piping was fun, but didn't like making the bag itself. Once you get the hang of making the bag, though, I promise it becomes a little more fun. And maybe that's me. Maybe I'm just a weirdo, but I love to make those bags. So before we kind of dive into week 3, I actually want to talk a little bit about your externships, especially now. We're in a very interesting time in the world, and finding kind of externship spots can potentially be a little bit tricky. So I want to share with you a map, let's see, of your like career service rep. You guys can definitely reach out to career services. They are helping however they can, trying to find locations for externships. I mean, you know, we obviously don't know how much longer like businesses are going to be closed, who's opening where, blah, 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 blah. But we definitely want to make sure that you're, you know, able to find positions or spots for your externship. You guys have this class, and then your patisserie class, so your K's class comes next, and then after that is externship already. So does anybody have anywhere kind of set up yet, as of yet, for an externship, or have any ideas of where you might be wanting to do it? If not, that's fine. You guys definitely have time. You just, you know, start looking around. But let me share with you so that you guys can see your map. So each section of the states has a different career service rep, and then there's the number there. I'm going to make sure this is on the class page for you. That way you know exactly kind of who to reach out to depending on your region. And they have really cool, like really good tips and like helpful tips and services for you. You know, they do stuff that I didn't even know that they do. So if you're struggling, if you're stumbling, if you're just not sure what to do or where to go, definitely reach out to career services. Jesse said everything's shut down. Yeah, Andrea, everything's kind of shut down. Let's see, Joy, your career service rep sent a list and informed you yesterday. Okay, good. So she's gonna start contacting people. That's awesome. That's what he said. They're so helpful. Like, don't feel like, oh man, there's nowhere to go. Like, what am I supposed to do? Touch base with them. They will help however they can. They're really awesome over there. What else? So submissions, I did notice submissions are a little low. Now I know that there's no kind of late penalty right now, so you don't have to worry about that. But I really want you guys to stay on top. Not everyone, I'm not talking to everybody on the screen here. You really want to make sure that you're staying on top of submitting. That way at the end, it doesn't become like a snowball effect. Now, I totally get if you can't find the ingredients and things like that. Trust me, I know. But I just want to just friendly reminder, just make sure that even though you don't have to worry about having that kind of late penalty tagged on there, just still make sure that if you're able to, that you're staying on top. And especially with this week and next week, I know that sometimes chocolate can feel a little bit intimidating, but I don't want that to be the reason why, you feel like, well, I don't want to turn it in, or, I don't want to attempt it type thing. Don't. If anything, reach out to me and I will gladly kind of give you a refresher and go over things with you, because I really want to make sure that you're understanding and you're learning the lesson. And I want this to be a positive experience. I'm not here to tear you down or anything. I am just here to share with you what I have learned along my way. So that's it for that. We can start talking about week 3 now. Serena, did you want to say something?
Oh no, I was just logging on.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to call you out. Linda, yes, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say, as far as my internship, it's going to be I'm in Chicago, and it's going to be kind of tight because Lightfoot is telling the restaurants no. They was on the news today. She was just saying no, no, no.
Yeah.
Because more and more people keep dying. The statistics is going up for Chicago. So she's kind of, iffy about it right now.
No, I understand that. That's why I said stay in contact with career services.
I have talked to them. I talked to them.
Yeah, I remember. I remember you told me.
I talked to them.
Definitely good, because I think that they're going to start coming up with plans if it kind of seems that like restaurants and bakeries just aren't going to be opening up or even able to like take on. Maybe they may not be able to take on. They was
talking about maybe take another class. For 6 weeks.
Yeah, they might do something like that. Who knows? We're here to make sure that you are getting like that full experience. So whatever it takes, we're going to make sure that we do for you all, so that you can, get the whole vibe. Super exciting.
And it'll be interesting to take an extra class, maybe something we haven't had before.
Maybe. Never know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we're going to be making truffles. Yay, I love truffles. So who all has worked with ganache before? And I should start seeing lots of hands. Yep, there we go. Me. I love ganache. So ganache can be used for covering cakes. You can use it as cake filling. You can use it for tarts and of course confection. So ganache is just, it's definitely a pastry shop staple. Your creme anglaise, pastry cream, ganache. It can be used for so many different items. Now, ganache is an emulsion. An emulsion, of course, is when, two things, they don't like each other, but they're going to get together anyway. So it's a fat and water emulsion. It's actually a double emulsion because cream is an emulsion of butter, fat, and water. And then chocolate is an emulsion because cream, of course, is a liquid. It's water-based. And then the chocolate, the cocoa butter, and the chocolate. So there's just all kinds of things in there that don't like each other, but they're going to come together and make just a creamy, dreamy deliciousness. So with ganache, there are different what we call ratios of ganache that you can make. Now, kind of the traditional ratio for ganache would be a 1-to-1. Now, that 1-to-1 means equal parts of chocolate to cream, or half and half, or milk, whatever your liquid is. It could even be a fruit puree. You can start to get into kind of water ganaches, which is a whole other thing. But we're, kind of talking about dairy-based ones. So that equal parts ratio is going to be really nice for fillings of cake. In its liquid state, you would enrobe like a mousse cake or something like that. You can use that equal parts ratio. Now, with dark chocolate, of course, the cocoa solids there are going to be higher than milk chocolate, and white chocolate, there's no cocoa solids in there at all. So what those cocoa solids do is they soak up that liquid. So they kind of absorb the liquid. So the darker your chocolate, the more firm that consistency is going to be. So let's say you do an equal parts ganache for white, milk, and dark. Your dark chocolate is going to be the firmest of all of them because the cocoa solid's in there. So with that said, in the class video, they are doing a 1-to-1 ratio. And kind of talking to previous students, I would like for you guys to do a 2-to-1 ratio. What is that, Chef? The 2-to-1 ratio is going to be twice as much chocolate as cream. So write this down, that way you know this, and I'll put it on the class page as well. A 2-to-1 ratio is going to be twice as much chocolate than your liquid. And the reason that I would like for you to do this is because this week you're going to be cutting or rolling your ganache. That way you can then dip it in some tempered chocolate. Now, if you do it with a 1-to-1 with a really dark chocolate, you'll get a great consistency, but I know that a lot of people are working with different types. Some people have milk, some people have a semi-sweet, bittersweet. So to make sure that everybody is seeing success this week, do that twice as much chocolate to your cream. So let's say you are using, let's call it 200 grams of chocolate. You're only going to need 100 grams of cream. So that's the ratio that I think that you guys will be really successful with this week. Flavoring, we'll definitely talk about flavoring, Trista, for sure. If you're working with white chocolate, though, you'll want to do a 3-to-1 ratio. So same thing. If your 3 is going to be 3 times as much chocolate than the cream. That's for white chocolate. Now, the reason that this is because there's no cocoa solids there. It is just sugar and fat, and then you're adding the cream to it, and it's going to end up being too soft. It's not going to set up if you try to do a white chocolate truffle with like an equal parts or something like that. So if you have 300 grams of white chocolate, you'll want to use 100 grams of cream, and that will give you a good consistency there. So I just wanted to go over some of those ratios for you guys. That way you're feeling good about, your consistency of the truffles. I don't want it to be like you're in the kitchen and you're like, Chef, that's too soft. So make sure you follow those guidelines for your truffle ratios. So Trista just asked a great question about flavoring. You can definitely flavor it. So what you could do if you want to flavor the cream. So some things that you would want to use to flavor the cream would be, let's say you want to do a coffee ganache. You could put some coffee beans in the cream, bring that up to a boil, and then allow it, cover it up and allow it to steep, allow it to set. Leave it for 15 minutes. And after that 15 minutes time, you can strain out those beans, and then you can bring that cream back to a boil and then continue on with the ganache process, which we will go over. We were asking about liquor in the chat. You can definitely use different liqueurs. In the recipe that we're using this week, I believe it calls for vanilla extract. So all you would do is, instead of vanilla extract, you're going to substitute for the liqueur that you're wanting to do. Orange liqueur is delicious. Of course, coffee. If you guys can tell, I love coffee and chocolate together, which who doesn't? Let's see, some other things that you could steep into your cream could be maybe some mint leaves. Is anybody a mint chocolate fan? Or do we have any people here that don't like mint chocolate? My husband doesn't like mint chocolate. You guys are crazy. I don't understand. Me, oh, you guys, what? It's one of my favorite combos. I can't deal with you guys. This class is done. It's over. Thank you. I love mint chocolate. Oh, thank gosh, somebody loves mint chocolate. Oh, man. But anyway, you guys could definitely do, flavor it up. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that whatsoever. So that is what I want to go over about ganache. So let's go into kind of the process. Well, how are we making these things, Chef? So let me pull up the video real quick, because there's a couple points on here that I did want to kind of touch on. Oh, I lost you guys, lost my screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. When using all right, so, oh, let's back it up. Back it up, back it up, back it up. So this is where I was talking about. You can either be cutting your ganache or you can be rolling your ganache. And I just wanted to kind of show you guys what you're looking for. So when you're done making your ganache, basically you pour it out into like any type of pan, any type of like rectangular, something like that. And then she comes in and she cuts it into squares. Those squares she will then dip in chocolate. So I wanted to show you that way you know like what I mean when I say cut ganache. That's it. That's all I wanted to show you from that video. So let's rewind and let's go ahead and pull up the recipe and let's walk through that. Okie doke. So we have, like I said, you can see here that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I would like for you guys to use a 2-to-1 ratio, so double the chocolate as cream. Let's see, they're doing 340 and 340. Let's go ahead and do 300 and 150. Again, I'll make those notes on the class page for you all so that you have that reference, because like I said, I just want to make sure that your ganache is setting up properly for you and you're not having any troubles with like having a soft ganache or anything like that. While I'm going through this, I can't see my chat box, so just bear with me. I'm going to walk through this and then we will definitely have questions after I kind of go through the steps of ganache. So if you think I'm ignoring you, I promise you I'm not. I just have like 5 screens open and I don't know where my chat box is right now. So let's go ahead and walk through the kind of how we're gonna make ganache. So remember how I said that it is an emulsion. So you do need to allow the chocolate and the cream to come together slowly. So what you're gonna wanna do is you're going to bring your cream up to the boil. Just kind of let it start boiling just very briefly. It says here about 30 seconds, just to get a little bit of that water out. Really, you just wanna make sure that it's hot enough to be able to melt the chocolate. The next thing that you're going to do is pour your cream over your chocolate. So you're gonna have your chopped chocolate or your little chocolate pellets. You do not have to use couverture for the ganache. It can be any type of chocolate. It does not need to be couverture. So you'll have that chocolate set aside in a bowl. Then you're gonna pour that cream over the chocolate. Do not begin to stir. Allow it to set there about 3 to 5 minutes, and the chocolate is going to begin to soften. It's going to begin to melt on its own. And then what you are going to do is, beginning in the center with a whisk, you're going to start making like small circular motions right in the center of it, because what you're doing is you are gradually incorporating the cream into the chocolate. You don't want to do it all at once, because we want to make sure that you don't break the ganache. You want to make sure that you get a really luxurious consistency. So starting in the center, go ahead and start whisking it, and then you'll see it start to come together, and you can start to work your way out and bring it all together until you get a smooth, homogeneous final product, an emulsion. Once you've done that, then at that point, you're going to one of two things. You can either pour it straight into that pan that we talked about. If you're doing the cut ganache, if you're doing the cut truffles, you can pour it straight into a pan, and you need to let it set. It can set at room temperature. Ganache is perfectly fine at room temperature. Who's got a question for me? Nope. Oh, I thought I heard a question. So that would be how you would set up your whipped, or sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I found my chat. I saw whipped ganache. That would be how you're setting up your cut truffles. Pour it in the pan, allow it to set at room temperature until it becomes firm. This is going to take some hours. You can definitely leave it overnight. It's perfectly fine. Let's see. 1 to 2 hours, but you can make it at night, leave it, come back to it the next day. So you can break down this process. It's perfectly fine. The other option, I'm going to stop sharing that because that is what I wanted to go over there. Your other option, if you don't want to do the cut truffles, is you can do rolled truffles. So what you're going to do here is just a little bit different. Once your ganache is made, you can go ahead and pour it into a piping bag. The reason that I would like you to pour it in a piping bag first is just it saves a step, honestly, because you do need to allow it to firm up a little bit before you start piping them out. And what you do is you take a sheet tray, line it with some parchment paper. Once your ganache has set enough that you can pipe it and it holds its shape, you're going to pipe out little Hershey Kisses, little chocolate plops on there. And then you're going to leave that to set for a little bit longer so they're completely firm. And then you come back and you roll them into rounds, which Chef does show you as well in the video. And you just roll them out. You can kind of dip them a little bit in cocoa powder. That will help to make sure that you don't get like melted chocolate all over your hands. Another tip would be to ice your hands. So you can literally dunk your hands in ice water. I have hot hands, so I have to work very specifically with chocolate. I usually like triple glove my hand, ice them down, work my truffles. If you start to see them get like really spiky, you'll understand when you start. If they look kind of spiky, your hands are getting them too hot. They should be very smooth once you roll them out. Just wanted to see if I missed any questions about that in the chat. So I don't see anything in the chat, so go ahead, hit me with your questions on the ganache process. Oh, Terilyn said she's got hot hands too. Yeah, those hot hands are the worst, but everything's workable, everything's manageable. Who's that? Who says Chef?
Question.
Go ahead.
What if we wanted to make cherry truffles?
So like cherry,
like a cherry truffle, like a flavored cherry. Now, could we like add like the puree to the chocolate? Could we cut up some like cherry chunks? Like, how would we do that?
Yeah, so you can definitely work with fruit purees. For this particular week, I would like you to stay with a cream-based ganache, but if you were wanting to flavor up like with actual fruit puree, you would remove a portion of the cream. So let's say you're working with 200 grams of cream. So instead of using that full 200 grams, half of that would be your fruit puree, and then the other half would then be your cream. Another thing that people work with is called like water ganache, where you don't see any cream at all, and you'll see just kind of fruit puree will be what holds it together. And with that case, there's other things that are getting added in there, different types of like invert sugars, and sometimes you'll see butter added into a ganache. If there's no like cream, that means that there's no fat coming from there, so that fat comes in from somewhere else, and oftentimes it's from the butter. So there are definitely lots of different types of ganache recipes. I don't have the book next to me right now, but I have a book about like this thick. Amazing. It's a chocolate book. I love it. But there's just pages and pages and pages of all these different types of ganache you can make. But ganache at its base is just your cream and your chocolate, but they do definitely start to get very fancy and very intricate. How large should the tip be for the piping bag? I would use, I would probably do like the 806 would probably be good. That might be a little bit too large. Maybe like the 804 would probably work fine. You just want it like small enough that you can, you know, pipe out like just little kind of Hershey-sized plops on your parchment paper. That way you can come back in and roll them. And honestly, your truffles can be whatever size you would like them to be. That's the joy of it, that you're making them. Make them how you want them. Do we have to dip in tempered chocolate? You do have to dip in tempered chocolate. Did somebody have a question? I think somebody's on mute. Let me pull up the required photos. Okay, so you will be dipping them in the tempered chocolate. You can, by all means, go ahead and dip them in sprinkles or cocoa powder or whatever you want in like for fun. But I definitely need to see truffles that have been dipped in tempered chocolate. So your two options this week: dipped chocolate truffles And your other option is molded chocolate truffles. So I have a video to show you about molded chocolate truffles. But for the dipped ones, whether you're doing cut or rolled ganache, you do need to dip them in tempered chocolate. Now, of course, your tempered chocolate will be your couverture. So your ganache can be any type of chocolate, but what you dip it in does need to be couverture. And you're gonna go through the whole process from week 2. We're gonna do that again for week 3. That's why I really wanted to kind of go through and recap that at the beginning of class, because you will be tempering again. Yay, get excited. Make sure you have some truffles set on a presentation plate. It doesn't say it here, but I like when you guys cut into it and show me the inside of your truffles, just so that I can see, you know, how did your ganache, like how does it look in there, and how thick is your shell, your chocolate shell. So usual self-ID, mise en place. Pour the cream over the chocolate, line sheet pan with the ganache, or your piped little Hershey Kisses. So does anybody have any questions about your dipped chocolate truffles before I go on to molded chocolate truffles?
Yes, Chef, I had a question.
Go ahead, Serena.
Okay, with the truffles, I've actually seen people actually make some truffles with sweetened condensed milk. Is that possible to do that, or is that something different?
It is a Brazilian dessert. I believe, I could be pronouncing it wrong and I don't want to butcher it, but I believe it's called brigadeiro. And they take the chocolate and it does get mixed with the sweetened condensed milk. It's almost like it is considered a truffle for sure. Because it's milk and chocolate getting combined together, but it's more of like a chocolate-based confection rather than straight chocolate, if that makes sense. It's not like a full-on chocolate truffle, because there's some other ingredients added in there as well, but it's almost like kind of this marriage of truffle and fudge, like, you know, those quick and easy fudges that you like pop them in the microwave. It's like a combo of that. So, but no, they're really tasty. But so it does have its differences.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the other option, if you guys are feeling up to it, which I hope you are because it's a lot of fun, are going to be molded chocolates, or also better known as bonbons, or sometimes you'll hear them called pralines. It just kind of depends on where you're at. Now, I know you're like, well, pralines are nuts, Chef. What are you on about? Well, over in Belgium, they decided to call them praline, and it just kind of stuck. So people from that region, you'll hear them called molded chocolates or bonbons. They'll also refer to them as pralines, not to be confused with the candied nut praline. So let's go ahead and share my screen. That way we can take a look at the molded chocolate truffles. All right. Okay, so this is the polycarbonate mold that I was kind of talking to you guys about last week. This is what you will find in a chocolate shop. You want to make sure that it is completely clean. You don't want to get any fingerprints in there, so keep your fingers out of it. You want to use like a cotton ball. Is really helpful to use. She is using a paper towel. But what you're doing there is you're just wiping out, making sure there's no dust, making sure there's no chocolate from the last time. When you're done making chocolate, what you would do is just kind of leave them to soak in some warm water, and that will help to break down the cocoa butter. That way you can easily clean it off. And then when you're done with it, once you've dried it, wrap it in cling wrap. That way you don't have to worry about it getting dust in there. So what you're going to do when you're making molded chocolate, as you can see her doing here, she is filling the cavities with her tempered chocolate completely, and you want to tap it on the side as well. You can use that palette knife that we talked about last week, because her tapping on the side is making sure that there's no bubbles in there. You want to make sure there's no bubbles. That way when you pop them out, it's a completely smooth encasing. So tapping the bubbles away, and then you're going to pour the chocolate out. Now what you've done is created a very thin shell to where you can fill it. I don't know how long she takes to go through each process, but I don't want to like fast forward it and miss something. she's really making sure she's getting those bubbles out. So now she's pouring her chocolate out of there, making sure that she has that nice thin casing. And again, super important to work clean. See how gorgeous that is? You're gonna let that set until it becomes hard. You can pop it into the fridge for like 10 minutes or so to help with the shrinkage. So shrinkage is really important. Chocolate that is tempered properly will shrink away from its surface, and that's what's gonna make sure that you can pop them out easily. What she's doing here is draining out any little bit of excess chocolate that might be there, just to make sure that you have a really thin shell. You don't want your shell to be too thick. Clean it off again. She's getting it prepared to put filling in there. So you can fill it with your ganache. For this week, I would like you to only fill it with ganache. But if you were to want to fill it with something else, if you worked with like a caramel, you got to make sure it's room temperature. If you try to go warm in there, it will melt the chocolate. So, but this week, just use ganache if you are filling these. All right, so her shell is completely set. Let's get up here where she starts filling them. Or did I miss the filling? See, told you guys, that's why I didn't want to fast forward. Well, anywho, I'm gonna stop that because I don't know where she's going. Once you create the shell, that's the most important part. That's what I really wanted you guys to see. You're going to pipe in your filling, but you need to leave just a little bit of headspace so that you can cap your chocolates. So once you've filled them, when you're working with ganache, you can allow the ganache to set just a little bit before you pipe them into the molds, because again, you don't want to go in with like too hot of chocolate. You don't want to, you know, those different temperatures. So your ganache does need to be cooled to room temperature before you pipe them in there. And then you need to allow your ganache to fully set before you cap them off. So once your ganache is fully set, you're going to come back with your tempered chocolate. You're probably going to have to temper it again because it's been some time between encasing and capping them off. So you're going to come in with your tempered chocolate again, pour it over that the mold, and then scrape that off. You can even take a sheet of acetate or a transfer sheet and lay that on top. Take your palette knife and slide it, and that's going to make sure that the transfer sheet comes in contact with the chocolate. Remove that. Again, you can pop that into the fridge for like 10 minutes or so. Chocolate's gonna shrink, everything's gonna cool. You wanna allow it. You can cure it for about 24 hours, but if you're just like really antsy and you wanna eat them, once everything is set, turn it out and they should come right out. You can give it a little knock on your countertop and they should pop right out of there for you. I saw a question about luster dust inside the molds before adding chocolate. Go for it. You can fling that luster dust everywhere. If you're using colors, it needs to be cocoa butter based colors. Water and chocolate don't like each other, so you cannot use regular colors. Got to use that cocoa butter color. You can use paintbrush. If you have a airbrush, if you have an airbrush, you can airbrush your molds. You can get really creative with it. I love to see those fancy ones. But yes, you would put that in your molds first and then pour your chocolate in and go on with that process. Is it hard to do this with silicone molds? It's a little tricky, not gonna lie, because they're very flexible, but it can be done. For sure, it can be done. I like the silicone molds are really helpful if you're doing like a solid chocolate, but you can definitely, you can do it, you know, you can do filled bonbons with the silicone molds. Just be patient with yourself because they are a little bit flexible. So as you're going through the process, it just might take a little bit more fandangling, but totally go for it. Anybody else have any questions? I didn't see any more in the chat. Go ahead, Linda. Sorry, I'm like flicking through all my little heads there. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. Is it okay if you use coconut in your truffles? The shredded coconut?
You can coat your truffles.
Yeah.
You can, but remember, I still want to see some just plain tempered chocolate.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Yeah, for sure. Any other questions for me?
What if we wanted to do a caramel flavor one? How would we do that?
So that's kind of what I was talking about. Like if you were filling with straight, like total caramel, you would want to allow it to, you would make your caramel sauce, allow that to cool to room temperature, and then you would come in and you would fill your cavities. If you were doing, yeah, that would be how you would do the caramel one. You wouldn't like mix your caramel with your chocolate. You can start to play with ganache and kind of introduce chocolate and caramels, but then it kind of just becomes a sweet, you know, like a sweet chocolate. But another thing that you'll see is like, if you do, you can layer your fillings. You'll often see that when people want to introduce caramel with chocolate together in a bonbon, you would fill it with ganache, maybe like halfway, and then you would come in and you would fill with caramel, and then you would go ahead and cap them. Or probably the other way around, fill with caramel first and then the ganache, so that you have a firm set there for when you come and cap it. Putting chocolate on top of caramel sometimes is a little bit tricky, so the consistency of caramel that you do want to work with is just a little bit thicker, just to make sure that like it's not running all over the place and running into the chocolate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
These are good questions. I love chocolate. I could talk about chocolate all day, all night. All right. Well, let's see. What else? Let's check out what's due this week. We have a survey this week, guys. We've got a mid-course survey under week 3. So please go ahead and do that. That lets us kind of know, what are you liking so far? What's going well? You know, where are we striving? Where could there be some improvement? So definitely do that survey. How are you feeling at Escoffier? We also have a knowledge check and a conversion check, both due on Tuesday. No discussion forum this week, so no worries there. And then your truffles. You can either do the enrobed truffles by rolling or cutting and then dipping them in your tempered chocolate, or you can do molded truffles. Your choice completely. I just want to see some more tempered chocolate again. Does anybody have any questions on anything that we went over this evening? I know it was a lot, right? We've got a lot to cover. I told you guys we had a lot to cover this week.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sinead.
Can you re-temper tempered chocolate?
Oh, good question. Yes. I tried to reach out to everybody. You can definitely retemper. You need new seed though. So if you have your chocolate that you're working with in week 2, melt that down, but you'll want to add new chocolate from your package. Hopefully you still have some left in your package. So remember that 2/3, 1/3. Your 2/3 can be what you used last week, and then your 1/3 will be fresh from the package.
Can you mix different types of chocolate?
With your ganache, yes. You can definitely combo them up. With your shell, you want to stick with just one because your chocolates do temper at different temperatures. But the ganache, you can definitely throw in some like a milk chocolate with like a really dark chocolate and start kind of creating your own flavor profiles. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Once you get like the baseline of it and you've got the science and the technique, you know, pastry in general, like once you guys are at this stage, I really like to encourage like kind of getting on your own feet, because you guys are grasping so much by this point. And once you're getting those fundamentals down, pastry becomes so open. You know, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's so strict. I'm so chill and laid back. And like people are like, you're a pastry chef? I'm like, yeah, but like you're so like chill about everything. I'm like, because once you know what's going on, like everything, like sky's the limit type thing, and it's so much fun. Just went off on my little tangent. I'm done. Let's see, I see, is it okay to use milk chocolate for truffles or just dark? You can definitely use milk. You can use whatever makes you happy. Again, remember those ratios that we talked about at the beginning of class. If you're using a white chocolate, do 3 times as much chocolate than your cream. That way it sets nicely. Milk chocolate and dark chocolate, you can do that 2-to-1 ratio. So double the chocolate as your measurement for the cream. A double chocolate truffle, you can make double chocolate truffles. You can make like 2 different types of ganache, and you can like take them and put them together, because remember, once they're set, they're malleable. You can definitely mess with them, and you can like mush them together and have like this swirled effect going on. You can make your 2 types of chocolate, and you can pour 1 chocolate there and pour like plops of your other, your ganache. You can pour your ganache out and then take a different type of ganache that you've made and do that too. And then you can go ahead and cut that, and you'll have like a swirled ganache with the different types. That's fun as well. There's so many things you guys can do. I saw ruby chocolate in the chat. Yeah. Do I still have it up? I know that we're coming to the end of class, but with ruby chocolate, if you're tempering it, you want to follow, let me pull it up real quick so that you kind of have an idea. Joy actually had reached out to me and asked me about that. With ruby chocolate, you want to follow the cool side of white chocolate. So melt it to 110, cool it to 78, rewarm it to about 84. I'm going to, hold on. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. This is a Calabo video showing you how to work with ruby chocolate. So I'm going to drop that in the box for you guys. That way you can watch that. And hold on. That way you can watch that and kind of get like an understanding of how to work with ruby chocolate. It's pretty much the same as everything else, but just ever so slightly different. Well, all right, guys, if we don't have any more questions, bittersweet is dark. Yes, bittersweet is dark. So dark chocolate has semi-sweets, bittersweet, and extra bitter. So your semis are going to be kind of in that like 50% range. Your bittersweets are going to start to be in like the 60s. And then when you'll get up into the 70s, then you're working with your extra bittersweets. Of course, when you start to get up to 90s, I only eat that when I've got a headache, but some people like it. All right, everybody. Well, it has been so much fun. Love chatting with you guys every week. And of course, chocolate, my favorite food. It's so much fun, so much to talk about. But I will let you take off. If you are watching the archive, please reach out to me with your questions, your concerns, whatever it may be. Don't forget all my contact info and my office hours are on the class page. That way I can be answering your questions as you have them. And if that is all from you guys, I hope you have a wonderful night. It's been fun. Bye.